but let's jump into the juicy bit.
Yeah.
And just to let Adam know that this is not pre-recorded, we are live, but I have to do a bit of a roundabout way to respond to Facebook. It's easier for me to respond during the session through YouTube. So if you're watching, we've got it live currently on Insta, YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn. So you have choices everywhere. So do talk us through then your first project. So you basically decided to kind of come closer to home. Now, please explain the story of how you managed to come like really close to home.
Yeah, it was interesting. So, well, I guess the first one I actually did was a service accommodation property, and I think that's why I ended up on the on your table being the sort of queen of SA and all the great things you did there. But actually, for me, the exciting thing in property, or the vision, has always been, the build development side as well. So, yeah, it was interesting actually. So again, I'll try and keep this as brief as I possibly can. But I remember I was very mundane Sunday, cutting the hedges. The green bin was overflowing, so I just knocked on my next door neighbour's front door and to ask if I could borrow hers because I just needed some more space. As we always did, we sort of got chatting, and she sort of said, "Oh, I'm thinking about sort of selling and moving to be on the coast with my daughter." So I said, "Oh, that's interesting." I said, "I've just, started property investing," and we literally sort of, laughed in a joke. "Oh, maybe I could buy a house then." Slept on it, couldn't sleep that night. Actually, went back the next day, but couldn't. We sort of said, "No, actually, quite serious. I think I would love to buy a house actually, but I've got no idea how this is going to happen." But one thing we always had is a brilliant relationship, and I said, "Look, could you give me a couple of weeks? I'll come back to you." And I suppose one of the first lessons I learned actually in property was I remember speaking to probably 2-3 different brokers. I had no sort of full-time salaried income. So by any conventional means, obtaining finance just to purchase outright and get a mortgage just wasn't feasible. So I think one of my underlying traits is that this sort of tenacity of like, I'm not going to give up because I know there's value here. I know the potential of what we could do to the property. And at the same time, I was sort of learning a little bit more about commercial finance, the different types of products that were available. And it was literally, again, that thing of keep taking action, keep having conversations, don't take no for an answer. And I remember being at a local networking meeting and just talking to a guy in the break who happened to be a broker. And he said, "Yeah, I've actually got a lender who is really big on the southeast of England. If it's a premium style property, I think they might be interested." And true to his word, we got on a call the day after and started a conversation. And actually it became apparent that, whilst by conventional means I wasn't able to get a mortgage, based on what I wanted to do to the property and the end valuation or GDV that we create based on what we wanted to do with it, meant that actually there was a way that we could make the sort of finance structure work. So yeah, very, very sort of, I guess, high level was that I'd gone from driving up the M1 to instantly knocking on a neighbour's door. She wanted to sell. We found a way to, a price that worked for both of us. And then I actually found a way to structure the purchase, interestingly, without not actually putting any physical money into the deal myself, to be able to fund the development. So
can I just repeat that? Because I think this, for most people, and that's where I think it's really interesting for us to talk more about this, because I remember when I very first started out, I think it was Kevin McDonald, Progressive. I remember watching a video and he kept saying it. The money's in the bricks. The money's in the bricks. And at the time I kind of was thinking, well, yeah, I kind of get it. But then over time, I really started to get it. And you inherently had a property that had a huge amount of equity in it, didn't you? So you had quite a bit of equity. But of course, as you said, you weren't able to necessarily get it out in a mortgage because that's kind of the normal and also the cheapest way.
Yeah.
But people are often fearful of, say, bridging or different kind of lending because it's a bit more expensive. And my favorite saying is to say, don't worry about the cost of the shovel when you're digging for gold. So it might cost a little bit more, but actually overall it pales into insignificance if you can really get it right. So can you, and so what Michael did here, which is absolutely amazing, not only did you not put your money in, and I'm hopefully I'm remembering correctly, but it literally covered all your costs as well. Is that correct? Do you mind sort of talking through in a bit more detail?
Yeah, absolutely. So, yeah, just to explain the structure and how it works. So, you know, I'll give you some sort of values so people have got an idea, because, you know, I often have people ping me or message me saying, I'm in an expensive part of the country, I can't find anything that works. And I was definitely in that position. So, you know, this is a 3-bed house, 3-bed semi, 650K to purchase. So, yeah, we had about £500,000 of equity in our own property, and so what we were able to do was leverage that as security, to act as the deposit. So rather than us having a big pot of cash, to put that down as deposit, which would then, you know, a lender would then give you the rest to do the work. We actually use the equity as the equivalent value. To be able to do that. And sort of going back to what you said earlier, Emma, you're absolutely right. I mean, so long as the numbers work, then if this is obviously a more expensive way of doing it. But if all the numbers stack, then it's kind of it's almost irrelevant to that point. So for me, it meant that we could use the equity in our house to put that down as a deposit, and then the lender then funded everything from stamp duty, the cost to purchase the property, the amount to develop the property, which was ended up being about 182K, and covered the legals as well. So it literally covered everything in terms of the purchase and the development of the property over a 12-month period. So yeah, the work took just under 6 months, and then there was the sale period at the end of it. So yeah, so it was I mean, you know, prior to
how did you feel about that? Like we come into property, don't we? Like at the moment, for instance, I am buying somewhere and I've got 130 and I need another 160. Okay. But you bought something with literally none of your own money inherently. You've said that it covered your legals, your stamp duty, your purchase, and the development. How did that feel when you actually realized that this was possible?
I mean, I was obviously shocked and delighted at the same time, because I was so passionate that this was a project that would be amazing. I knew what the end property would be worth and what it would look like, and so for me, the constant was always there's got to be a way this will work for a lender. But when it actually transpired, I was, yeah, it was great. I mean, it was great that it exists. I mean, it's yeah, I think that's why, you know, education and building, you know, the quote unquote power team around you and having experts and specialists that know this stuff in detail is so important, because, you know, you can't know it all yourself, but, you know, having some of these tools in your toolkit gives you a huge advantage. Because I've had people say to me, oh, have you come across loads, like, how are you doing this? But it's obviously, you know, once you kind of, you know, actually, you know, what you kind of find is that money and lending is actually not as difficult as you think to come by. Actually having the deals and the skill set and the education to go and you know, execute this well is actually the scarcer of the two resources. So yeah, no, it was like, I was kind of, it was a massive sort of, wow, this is great. Now I've got to go and make it work. But, yeah,
I love it. So just going back, and this is what was so powerful in what you did, is because you went back to being local, and not only local, it was literally your next door neighbor. You'd already kind of done up your house, hadn't you? You already had been living in and around that area, I think you said, for 10 years.
Yeah.
And so you had that knowledge basically without barely, I mean, I know you would have done, and I know we did, and all of those kind of things. But you, and obviously to get your lending and things like that, you have to be very clear. But you already knew how much that house was going to be worth. obviously you were able to purchase it at a certain level. So that is just so incredibly powerful. So let's jump straight in. Kind of give us a sort of an overview of what kind of a few of them. I know you've touched a bit, but a few of the numbers again, and also what you actually did. But really interesting, what I really liked about what you did is you really made it a kind of brand story. I mean, you literally kind of launched yourself and continue to do so. But tell us how that kind of progressed as well, and how that's helped you with your sort of network and building your network.
Yeah. I mean, I think absolutely. I think as it was a first project, there were a number of different things for me to think about, and the way I've approached each property actually is we always sort of brand each individual project and give it its own identity and personality, because I think that's really, really important. For me, this first project, it was really, obviously, a focus is always we want it to sort of make money, but for me, it was almost bigger than that, because it was almost a launch platform for, what we're going to do after. And I think for me, this is a sort of 20, 30-year journey, not a sort of one and done project. So a big focus was always really sharing the story throughout, creating a brand in and of itself, but almost this being the showcase to give people a real idea of what we were about. Because I talk really passionately about design being a big competitive advantage for us. We really think about like design and spaces and the flow of a property, but not these just being empty words. I'm really, really passionate, and I think one of the game changers for me was when I launched Remix. When we'd done the project on our own home, we really felt as a family the enormous power of having an improved environment meant that the way we lived together and the way we enjoyed life day to day was just massively improved. And I really wanted that to be the starting point and at the core of Remix. So, when we took this, sort of tired 3-bed semi, it was, okay, how do we now create a really wonderful, living environment for a family in the modern era where, people work from home more than they ever did, where mum and dad might want a sort of separate grown-up living room where the toys are. So we really think about, like, how does someone live there first, and then how do we design around that? So and that's what we did. And so it was a really enjoyable project. I think actually doing it next door was almost too close, because it was so all-consuming that I was popping around. I even cut a panel out the back garden fence, so I didn't have to keep walking around the front of the house. I mean, it was it was a bit much, but it was great. And I'm always in the detail of any project that I'm doing. So for me, it was really good on that level. And actually, I think one of the most pleasing things, and actually, again, there are certain things that you can never foresee coming. But when we were doing the project and we were just completing the project, the house on the other side of Mono House that we were doing, they were also doing some work. And I remember standing outside, and we were getting the driveway was being finished, and they were landscaping the front. And the contractor who was doing the house next door, we just started chatting, and I'd found this other deal. And I just sort of really struck up a great conversation with him quite quickly. And I'd sort of interacted with him a little bit during this project. And what I loved about him, he was always, he did what he said he'd do. He was always very timely in his communication, really nice guy to chat to. And I just said, just out of interest, you couldn't just price this project up for me. And we literally got chatting, and I got a really good sense from him, but I could tell he was really interested in potentially working on this project, and he priced it up. And he came back to me the same day, which, anyone who's worked with sort of contractors will probably know that doesn't typically happen. So that for me was like, wow, this is impressive. I like the way this guy works. And long story short, but we ended up talking a lot. We ended up going for, a few coffees. And he ended up sort of partnering with me on what was to be the next project on the back of that conversation, which again, just literally happened, sharing with somebody openly, here's what I'm doing, this is my focus. What was funny though was that he thought that I'd been in the game for like 10, 20 years because he'd seen this branding everywhere and, you know, high vises with Remix Groupon and all this sort of stuff. So, you know, I'd obviously created a good impression because he thought I was Mr. Experience when in fact this was, I'd only been doing it sort of 18 months at that point. But it's funny how these things play out. But I think what it does pay homage to is, you know, kind of, I guess, being consistent, sharing your values, telling your story, and doing it in a very clear and sort of consistent way. So, yeah.
Amazing. And it always makes me laugh because I feel almost frightened for you to go out of your road. It just seems that, you know, you buy the next door and then you find the next door but one, you find your next business partner. I mean, that really is quite tremendous in how to keep it local. So yeah, absolutely amazing. And just going back just a step when you talked about this kind of family environment, and exactly what you have done is so very important. I do a bit of kind of binge watching on certain property programs, and it was very interesting. Oh my gosh, I'm going to forget her name. It's a lady and a man that do. Oh, that's not really good. Anyway, I can't remember, but they basically.
Kirsty.
Yes. What's her name? Kirsty.
Phil and Kirsty also.
That's it. Yeah, Phil and Kirsty. And it's so true. Just these houses where you have, you know, like a little kitchen and it can be so simple, even just one kind of you know, wall down. And there was another occasion that I remember really clearly where they were going to put a door into the living room, and she was just, and I kind of thought, oh yeah, that looks interesting. And she was just like, no, because you're basically going to make it's just going to become a corridor. And just some of that kind of forethought is just incredibly powerful. So for the fact that you were able right from the off start to see that, to understand that, and to keep that, I think is really incredible. So what did you actually do to the house? I know it was a complete refurb, but could you just give us a bit of a top line stuff? Because you know, it wasn't a light refurb, was it?
No, it was pretty full on in the end, actually. So yeah, it was like I say, it was a you know, kind of classic sort of tired 3-bed semi. So we'd extended to the rear and converted the garage at the side, and we basically sort of reimagined the building so that, you know, we massively improved the relationship between the back of the house and what was a wonderful garden. We'd added another bedroom upstairs. As you say, we'd gone from like a sort of slightly smaller kitchen to this just really expansive, really light, bright, airy, open plan kitchen, family living space, separate living area, downstairs study, and just really modernized the entire building. So yeah, again, you know, part of my focus is really trying to get that balance right between, you know, yes, design, but understanding the data as well. Because I think you're right, you touched on it earlier, Emma, which was one advantage that actually gave me confidence with this first project, was because I knew the area so well, I understood the, you know, what the key factors were, and the, you know, what the numbers that could be achieved, but also what people were really looking for. So again, doing that extra bit of diligence and speaking to different agents about, okay, what are people asking for? You know, investing in different data platforms that sort of tell you things like how much demand are there for certain types of property in the area. So, so all of those different things added together helped me kind of create that picture of, you know, in my mind's eye, who's going to be living there? Is the demand there? What do they actually want and need? And what people are prepared to pay for it. And so the great thing I love about property is there are enough data points out there if you do the work to get quite a good degree of certainty. Now, all of that said, I'm going to just completely rain in my own parade a little bit. It's, you know, we got to the middle of last year, the whole Liz Truss thing, you know, the market was just horrific. So we didn't actually achieve quite what we wanted to with the property in terms of sale price. We still kind of, you know, it still did okay, but it wasn't as amazing as it could have been. But again, going back to that point of that, you know, when you're in it for the long term, it's kind of, for me, it was, you know, the success came from, you know, everyone was clear that this is the quality of work we do. So in terms of, you know, raising investment and private finance, that gave people confidence. Obviously, I met my business partner from that as well. And so there were so many other additional benefits on, you know, beyond just the commercial aspect that made it, for me, a really big success. And, you know, as you know, Emma, every single thing that you do in property, you're always learning. There's always something that you're picking up, or I could have done this a little bit better, or maybe we'd do this slightly different, or wouldn't work with that person again, or actually this was amazing. And we've, you know, there was so many, you know, high points across the process that it was a great way to kick off.
Amazing. And I love the fact that you brought that up again, and that's something I do talk a lot, because for me it's starting off with those foundations, isn't it? So it's understanding your area, and then like you mentioned, it's kind of like a lot of people are like, oh, that's too expensive, but inherently it's understanding your area, and then what the needs and the demands are within that area. So it might be that, you know, most people, let's be fair, you know, on average, it's kind of a 3-bed, if you're an investor, 3-bed terraced house, for instance. That's kind of what everyone's looking at. But everyone is looking at that, aren't they? So, you know, you're going to have families looking at that. You're going to have investors, you know, social housing, just a whole array of people. And it's looking at, well, what is it that is needed and is seen? Because it might actually be, so for a while, like 1-bed flats, they tend to be stickier in some places than say a 2-bed flat. So for instance, if you could find a big 1-bed flat and convert it into a 2-bed flat, then potentially that is something that will do really quickly. So that's exactly what you did. You were out there understanding to a minutiate level that you need, you know, X en suites, you need this kind of big open plan. And not only that, you, as you mentioned, brought in this whole branding. I mean, you're the front, what do you call it? The pavement power, or whatever it's called, is unbelievable. When you walked past that house, it's absolutely beautiful. There was no way that you couldn't walk past and go, wow, that is a stunning building. You absolutely finished it right to the end. And that's what makes all the difference. So there's going to be lots of people out there, Michael, who literally never sold their properties, or really took a massive loss. But because you'd done all that due diligence, even when there are these kind of troughs and waves going through, you actually were able to still complete that project. So, you know, real congratulations to that. And I absolutely love the way that, you know, I know you mentioned it, but Mono House, kind of, it was always like, oh, what's happening? But it's, you know, it's exciting. You kind of get drawn into this story as well, which is really sort of powerful from your sort of, you know, branding and marketing element as well. So yeah, really congrats on that.